It's November 2008. The global financial crisis is in full swing. Satoshi Nakamoto recently published a paper on a cool little idea called Bitcoin. Barack Obama has just been elected President of the United States. And amidst all of this, on November 11th, DICE released Mirror's Edge to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. But it wasn't the runaway success that EA and DICE had been hoping for. A PC port would come out in January 2009, but this wouldn't stop it from underperforming compared to sales expectations. Despite this, through word of mouth, Mirror's Edge quickly became a cult classic, loved and recommended by many, including myself. I first played it nearly a decade ago in 2013, so it holds a special place in my heart alongside games like Minecraft, Gmod, Metro 2033, and the Bethesda Fallout games, which were sort of my foundational experiences with PC gaming. I've been really wanting to make a video about it for a while now, and what better opportunity than its 14th anniversary. So I gave it another run through to feel what it's like in 2022. And keep in mind, I'm basically coming at it with fresh eyes since it's been about 3 to 4 years since my last playthrough. But if you've never heard of Mirror's Edge, the premise is that it takes place in this near future city with a totalitarian government that monitors all communication. The main character, Faith, is a runner, someone who uses hardcore parkour to carry messages across the city's rooftops for clients who want to avoid the government's prying eyes. You're basically a human messenger pigeon. The most immediately striking thing about the game is its visual style, which has held up really well over the years. The color palette for any particular section is pretty restricted, predominantly white with an accenting color like blue or orange. I think that the reason that the aesthetics hold up is because when you go for a simpler, more minimalist style, it's easier to make what you're detailing look good, and you can get away with more tricks like repeating textures or objects. I've mentioned this in other videos, but I think it's better to have a good art style rather than placing all your eggs in graphical fidelity. This style goes beyond simple aesthetics though. It was chosen to help make the runner's vision system work. Runner's vision is a visual representation of Faith's instinctual sense of the potential paths in front of her, giving the player hints and suggestions on where to go. By making white the predominant color and limiting the use of other ones, the red that denotes runner's vision really stands out and helps players make split-second decisions. I also find that this color palette is an important part of this game's identity. The crisp white towers of the city, with sparsely scattered splashes of colored industrial appliances, scream Mirror's Edge just as much as white-walled test chambers are synonymous with Portal. The only thing I don't really like about the visuals is the animated style for some of the story cutscenes. Anyone watch that show 16 on Cartoon Network as a kid? It kind of reminds me of that, but not in a good way, kind of in a, why are you doing this way? But the real meat of this game is its fluid and responsive movement system. Your actions have a sense of weight and momentum to them, which makes the basics of free running feel intuitive, and so pulling off a crazy stunt or getting into a real flow is exhilarating and immersive. It's the polar opposite of something like Assassin's Creed's movement, where the game does most of the work for you. Now, I'm not shitting on the Assassin's Creed game's parkour system here, they have their merits, but while you can pull off some cool moves in the Assassin's Creed games, it never feels like you are doing them. Like, taking a leap of faith is cool the first few times, but once your brain realizes you can't die if you just jump from the right spot, it becomes a lot less interesting. But Mirror's Edge keeps you hooked because every single cool stunt or sexy combination of moves, or plunge into the streets below, is a result of your mastery, or lack thereof, of its mechanics. To start off with, there are a handful of simple moves you can do, like wall running, sliding, scrambling up walls, vaulting, wall jumps, or springboarding off of objects for a large jump. The moves themselves are simple, but the fun and complexity come from chaining them together to build or preserve your momentum. Some moves will give you a speed boost when you do them right, while others, like sliding or climbing, will almost bring you to a stop. And there are no unlocks or skill trees. The game teaches you every move from the start, and as you play you learn how to use them effectively. The way you see the world starts to change, and you begin to realize the variety of ways that you can approach each challenge. For example, on a first playthrough, you might take these stairs like a normal person, but coming back to the level later, you may realize that you can scamper up this wall and do a quick turn backwards jump to reach the second level much faster. Or in this scenario, you might decide to take the less obvious option and wall run here rather than slide under. The depth of this system is really cool, and realizing how much you're improving is a great feeling. The system has just the right amount of depth to be picked up easily while also being complicated enough that you really want to master it, and the feeling of recognizing your own improvement is super satisfying. But you know, it's not perfect. There were plenty of times where I really felt like I should have grabbed onto a ledge or something and just became a pavement burger. Like, through all my playthroughs, this pipe has been my nemesis. Okay, so this pipe works normal. The next pipe, yeah, jump to it fine. Oh, but this one? This last one here? Psych, bitch, you just quantum phased through solid matter. You'd better hope that the ground's feeling extra bouncy today, loser. For some goddamn reason, you can't just side jump to it from the middle pipe like every other pipe in the game. You have to climb all the way up to the top of the middle pipe and then jump down onto it in this really janky way. But this is a minor issue and you won't really run to it in many places in the game. The precision and feel of the movement is just so good that the feeling of gradual improvement becomes addicting. There were so many times where I intentionally Minecrafted myself so I could go back to a checkpoint because I was just thinking, no, that was too sloppy, I can do that way better. There wasn't anything forcing me to do this, the campaign doesn't have a time limit and I wasn't speedrunning, but I just wanted to go back and master those moves for the fun of it. Mirror's Edge is one of those games that you pick up and just can intuitively tell that it has a high skill ceiling. With its short runtime and very linear levels, the game was just made to be speedrun, to be replayed again and again to refine the flow of your movements. The game even has a built-in mode that lets you speedrun individual levels. The mode I liked the most was the time trials, where you have to find the fastest route between a series of checkpoints. Honestly, I kind of like them more than the main story because you can just jump in really quickly and go fast without any pretense. They are often based on the best and most open parts of the story maps and mix up the routes you have to take compared to the story to make things interesting. I found that there was a lot more creativity involved in figuring out the fastest route. Unlike the campaign, many of the routes backtrack and loop, so you really need to experiment around with which way is best. And if you mess up, the routes are only like 1 to 4 minutes long, so restarting is much less painless. But if you don't like playing games or levels over and over again to find those little improvements, instead maybe preferring to have more exploration, the game can feel a little bit linear and restrictive. At first, I felt this way when I replayed it. While you can work on maximizing your moves along the level's route, there are a few true branching paths. The maps are all essentially just straight shots from A to B. You might find a shortcut here or there, but true alternate routes really aren't there. With gameplay so focused on fluid movement, I was disappointed there weren't really any opportunities for exploration or just roaming levels at your own pace. I thought it would have been interesting for the game to feature more open levels. Think like those in Dishonored or Hitman. You get dropped into an open level and can approach completing your objective in different ways, maybe with some optional side objectives sprinkled in. But after playing the game more, I understand it might be better for the game to be so linear. It makes speedrunning and replaying the game so much more accessible. DICE wanted people to play this game again and again, and if the levels had multiple branching paths, that would have introduced a level of complexity to the speedruns that may have put people off from doing that. By making the game shorter, simpler, and more linear, starting a new run is less of an intimidating commitment. You can complete the game in a single night after all. You just start a new campaign, there's no figuring out new areas, just figuring out how to go through everything you've already done better. That being said, since the sequel/reboot Mirror's Edge Catalyst is open world, I'm really excited to finally play it and see how the change from linear level design affects the feel of the gameplay. When it comes to the story,
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Coming in at around 5 to 8 hours long, most of which is going to be focused on gameplay, there just isn't enough time to learn about the side characters and get invested in what happens to them. To be honest, we don't even learn that much about Faith. I think we just care more about her because we play from her point of view. Likewise, the background lore of this totalitarian society and the need for runners like Faith to deliver discreet messages away from the prying eyes of the government is interesting, but it's not really delved into too deeply. Overall, the story is serviceable in that it provides justification for you doing what you do, but it doesn't go much farther than that. My biggest problem with the game was the combat, which is basic to say the least. You've got basic punches and kicks, and can also do powerful sliding or jumping kicks. You can also disarm and take your enemy's guns to use against them, and that's pretty much it. To start off with, trying to play the game without killing anyone is just aggravating. When you perfectly pull off a fluid series of moves to take down an enemy, or hit a perfect disarm without breaking your stride, you feel like someone out of an action movie. But when your punches somehow fail to register, you miss the slim disarm window, or a soldier breaks the laws of physics to whack you out of the sky with the butt of his rifle, helplessly getting filled with lead is frustrating as fuck. The room for error is just so low because Faith has such little HP, and I found myself annoyed with the combat most of the time. I've seen some people excuse the poor combat, saying that Faith isn't a trained soldier or policeman, and that it's bad because you're supposed to avoid it. But there's like 3 or 4 sections of the game that new players will probably need to get through with combat, and it's not fair to expect them to have to break out speedrun strats to deal with it. If the average player is going to need to use the combat system, it should be fun. There's no excuse. I honestly think this is just cope from people who want to defend the game. Like, if they were intentionally showing Faith isn't a fighter, why are her shots laser accurate? There's like no spread on most of the guns. I think there are plenty of ways that they could have done the combat better while also disincentivizing it, like making missions spawn more enemies and making them tougher the more enemies you kill. So if you're trying to beat the game as fast as possible, you have an incentive to kill less so there are less enemies in your way. Just a thought. Anyway, I tried to do most of the combat sections without killing anyone. But my god, was that an exercise in frustration. For most of them, I just ended up caving and shooting my way through. The problem with this is that shooting enemies is boring. The shooting mechanics are extremely simplistic, and using guns trivializes combat. I wanted to use martial arts to feel like a badass, not stop my flow to play a third-rate shooter. And that's the fundamental issue here. The combat system and the parkour system just do not mesh well. Whether you're using melee or guns, everything combat related will pretty much slow you to a complete stop and ruin that amazing feeling of flowing seamlessly through the level. I think they should have added more ways to chain parkour in combat. While there are a few moves that you can pull off while doing parkour, like the death from above one, these feel extremely situational, and it's almost always better to just hide around corners and take enemies down slowly, one at a time, or just stealing a gun and finishing off the rest. They could have added more special moves that combine parkour and combat, like transitioning from a wall run to a takedown, or being able to springboard off of enemies for a high jump, or even being able to preserve momentum when doing slide or jumping kicks and disarms would have helped. Of course, this would also require some of the combat zones to be changed to encourage using these new moves, as in a few of them, the enemy placement and design of the room made it really hard to do much parkour without getting shot down faster than most of my video ideas. I mean, look at this, it's literally just a parking garage. You can't do any parkour here. It's such a waste. I sometimes feel like combat was included just because they felt they needed it to appeal to a mass audience. It's not like it ruins Mirror's Edge, and like I said, it's not like it doesn't have its moments, but I really would have preferred less combat and more of a focus on the parkour, which is where the game really shines. But despite its imperfections, I really enjoyed playing Mirror's Edge again. I actually want to go back and get 3 stars on all the time trials when I'm done with this video. And while playing the game and making this video, I couldn't stop thinking about how impressive this game must have been when it came out in 2008. And I think that lasting impression is probably a big part of why this game became a cult classic. This would have been a completely new experience for players. It was the first game to do first-person grounded parkour, and DICE nailed it, basically creating a new genre. I mean, shit, when I first played it 5 years after release, there still wasn't anything like it. And there's still pretty few games within this niche subgenre. As far as I can think of, it's just Mirror's Edge and its sequel / reboot and the Dying Light games. But let me know if you know of any others. And to be clear, I'm excluding games like Call of Duty or Get to the Orange Door that have free running in a first-person perspective, as I'm talking really about more grounded experiences. Besides some of the stuff that I was talking about before, Mirror's Edge holds up pretty well. I could honestly still see it being released today, albeit maybe as an indie game. Heck, the only thing that really dates this game is the references to bird flu in the elevators. Man, weren't those simpler times. So if you haven't played the original Mirror's Edge, go get it. Put it on your wish list. It's pretty cheap at around $25, and when it goes on sale, it's usually cheaper than a Starbucks coffee and worth so much more than that. Anyway, that's all for me today. Like the video if I gave you something to watch while eating a meal. If you're procrastinating, get back to work. And if you want to see more game reviews like this one, sub for more homebrewed gaming content.